Hello and welcome to the Bible for Worship here at St. Paul Lutheran Church on this fifth Sunday of Easter, when our scripture lesson is written in the Gospel of John, the 15th chapter, verses 1 through 8. Jesus said, "I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. The branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You've already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire and burned. If you abide in me and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples." The Gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. This passage about Jesus as the vine is part of 3 chapters of John's Gospel that are known as Jesus' farewell discourse. That is, they are sayings of Jesus that have been collected together and presented at the end of his Last Supper with the disciples, as it were, between his saying that Peter will deny him that night and the moment when they go to Gethsemane and that passion story continues. The saying about "I am the vine" is also one of 7 or 8, depending on how you count, in which John, the gospel writer, records Jesus as having said, "I am." And that in itself already speaks to connections between John's community and biblical Israel. Because when Moses asked God, "Whom shall I say sends me to Pharaoh in order to free your people from slavery in Egypt those centuries and centuries before?" The response that Moses hears is, "Say that I am has sent you." So when Jesus says, "I am," John's community knows that something very significant is being conveyed. In this particular case, while Jesus says, "I am the true vine," he's also very clear about saying, "My Father is the vine grower." And that image again takes us back to biblical Israel, to Jeremiah 2, verse 21, where God speaks to Israel and says, "I planted you like a vine. Why did you turn bad and not yield the fruit I wanted?" And that verse in Jeremiah is quite likely already a summary of an entire song in the book of Isaiah, chapter 5, verses 1 through 7, where it's called the Song of the Vineyard, and the prophet says, "My beloved had a vineyard on a very fertile hill." The prophet refers there to the beloved as God, and to Israel as the vineyard. So, just as in Isaiah it is the beloved who has a vineyard, so in John's Gospel, Jesus says, "My Father is the vine grower, and I am the vine." For John's community, this means that Jesus is the source of their nourishment and their life and all of their fruitfulness, just as Israel as a whole people was the source of life and fruitfulness for biblical Israel. Recall that in John's Gospel, Jesus says, just a chapter before in this same farewell discourse, "In my Father's house are many dwelling places, many rooms." And we heard last week when Jesus talked about, "I am the good shepherd, I have other sheep who are not of this flock." So when Jesus says, "I am the true vine," that refers to the fact that for John's community, their source is in Jesus. Just as for someone living in Israel, in the Jewish people, the covenant is that source. It's not about which community is right. As becomes clear at the end of this passage, it's about God's glory. In this, Jesus says, "My Father, the vine grower, is glorified, that you bear much fruit as my disciples." We know that if we drive by a home and there's an exquisite garden with flowers blooming all over, or a beautiful vegetable raised bed with tomatoes and cucumbers and all manner of wonderful fruit, we give thanks for the earth, we give praise to God, but it also brings some glory to the person who planted those flowers, who cultivated that raised bed, who is growing those things. And so, as God grows the vine of Jesus, and us as the branches who are dwelling in that vine, even as the vine dwells in us, so when we, the branches, bear much fruit, the glory goes to God. Thus, John the Gospel writer encourages the community through the words of Jesus at this critical moment near the end of his life by assuring them that they have a source of their life, that it is Jesus himself who abides in them and in whom they can abide, so that through that mutuality, God can bring forth fruit for God's world. God bless.